Daenerys Targaryen stood at the shores of Dragonstone, her silver-gold hair catching the wind as Drogon circled above, roaring one final time before soaring eastward, back toward the lands of Essos. Her hand reached up, but she did not call him back. She had made her decision. The Iron Throne, with all its blood and fire, would remain untouched. Let Westeros wage its wars and whisper its betrayals. Daenerys had found a different path. The Dragon Queen would not conquer the Seven Kingdoms. She would return to Essos, to rebuild not just cities, but ideals. Without Drogon at her side, the threat she posed to Westeros waned instantly. Varys and Tyrion were stunned, unsure if she had lost her ambition or found something nobler. Jon Snow, still raw from the war against the Night King, did not question her. He merely watched as the dragon disappeared into the sky. In his heart, he had known Daenerys was never meant for Westeros. There was too much fire in her to be bound by ancient castles and crumbling thrones. Drogon flew across the narrow sea, his wings parting the clouds, returning to the familiar burning plains, near Meereen. There, he waited, hunted, ruled the sky, reminding the people of Slaver's Bay that the Dragon Queen's wrath was not a forgotten myth. When Daenerys returned weeks later by ship, she was welcomed not with fear, but hope. She did not come as a conqueror this time. She came as a liberator again, but this time with wisdom forged from failure, loss, and the long journey across the continents. Daario Naharis greeted her at the steps of the restored Great Pyramid. "You've returned," he said, still the rogue but older, tempered. "I thought Westeros would have you." She smiled faintly. "Let the wolves and lions devour each other. I've fed them enough." Under Daenerys's new vision, Meereen became more than a free city. It became a capital of the new Essos alliance. She began forming a council, not of nobles, but of freedmen, traders, and wise elders. She sent envoys to Volantis, to Qarth, to even distant Asshai. Her message was simple: trade, peace, and justice under the shadow of her dragon. But peace was never easy in Essos. The Sons of the Harpy had been scattered, but their ideology still simmered in the corners of the old elite. Assassins tried to strike her down 3 times in her first year. The 4th attempt came from a council member she had trusted. But Daenerys survived. She always did. Fire cannot kill a dragon. Far away in Westeros, the war between Cersei and the Northern Coalition continued without her. The lack of a dragon turned the tide. King's Landing did not burn. Jon Snow was declared king in the north, but refused to march south again. Arya and Sansa turned their attention inward, trying to hold together the fragile remnants of the Stark. Legacy. Bran, strange and distant, whispered of futures where dragons burned cities, and perhaps in their hearts they knew the world had been spared. Back in Meereen, Daenerys began expanding her vision. She helped Yunkai rebuild with their own people without warlords. She funded schools in Astapor. She even opened dialogue with the Dothraki to settle among the grasslands near the Rhoyne River, building semi-nomadic villages where their traditions could survive without endless raids. Drogon flew often now, not to destroy, but to guard and to remind. She became more than a queen. She became a legend reborn. The breaker of chains did not sit on a throne of swords, but ruled through influence, fear, and love. Her council grew, attracting minds and voices from far beyond Meereen, young maesters from Old Town, ex-slaves from Lys, even a red priestess who swore Daenerys was Azor Ahai reborn. But legends attract enemies, and in the distant west, whispers began again of dragons rising in the east. A coalition of merchant princes and bitter old enemies started to form. They feared Daenerys not for what she had done, but for what she could become. If she could unite Essos, Westeros would be next. A second Valyria, rising not from stone, but from ashes and gold. One night, as the stars blazed over the warm bay. Of Meereen, Daenerys stood atop the pyramid with Drogon behind her. His body shimmered with heat, wings stretching across the skyline. "It's beginning again," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Not with fire, but with the memory of it." Drogon growled low in agreement. The fires of Meereen's rebirth glowed like embers beneath the night sky, but across the east, old forces stirred. The Council of Nine, a shadowy pact of merchant princes from Qohor, Myr, Pentos, and beyond, had come to one agreement. Daenerys Stormborn was not just a danger. She was a threat to their way of life. Her ideas of justice, of freed slaves voting, of dragons not used for war but peace, were poison to men who thrived on power bought with coin and blood. Back in Meereen, Daenerys remained unaware of the exact nature of this alliance, though she sensed the shift in the winds. Reports came of caravans ambushed, emissaries turned away, of spies disappearing from the docks of Pentos. She tasked Missandei, now a respected scholar in her court, with investigating. Grey Worm, promoted to general commander of the Essos Free Army, began discreet patrols beyond their borders. Meanwhile, Drogon's presence had begun to change the land itself. Fields around Meereen flourished, fertilized with ash and the bones of the past. The people began to whisper that Daenerys had not simply brought a dragon, she had brought an age. Children born during this time were given names like Viserion, Rala, and Dracarys. The songs changed. No longer did bards sing only of Westerosi knights or battles for the Iron Throne. They sang of the queen across the sea, the one who broke masters and did not claim crowns. In the growing city of New Astapor, a miracle occurred. Former slaves, once enemies under rival banners, worked together to build a canal that brought fresh water from the hills. Daenerys traveled there personally, and the people welcomed her as if she were a goddess, but she made sure they remembered she was mortal, that her power came not from bloodlines but choices. "I was born into fire," she told them, "but I learned to build with stone." Despite these triumphs, dangers multiplied. The Red Temple in Volantis split over her. Some priests declared her the promised savior. Others decried her as a pretender. Flames in their temples danced violently when her name was spoken. One red priestess, Yesmara, came to Meereen and offered to serve her. "You are flame made flesh," she said. "The night fears you." But Daenerys had heard such prophecies before. She did not trust fire blindly anymore. That winter, a fleet from Lys, masked as traitors, attacked a Meereenese port. 50 died. The attackers were routed, but the message was clear. War was coming, not from the south, not from the Dothraki, but from the polished halls of Essos' oldest cities. Daenerys summoned her council and laid a hand on the hilt of her father's old Valyrian sword, Blackfire, gifted to her by a repentant noble from Pentos who had once backed Viserys. "We will not strike first," she said, "but we will finish what others begin." Daario Naharis, now leading the Sons of the Dragon, a newly formed cavalry of former Second Sons and Dothraki warriors, proposed raiding the Qohor trade routes. Daenerys refused. "If we become pirates, we are no better than those we oppose." Instead, she sent letters to every major free city. In them, she wrote not threats but warnings. "I do not wish war," she penned in her own hand, "but I will not let fear rule the world again. Essos has been burned before. I will not let it burn again unless you force my hand." In Westeros, the Meisters of the Citadel took notice. The Raven Scrolls reached Old Town, and a conclave was called to decide what Daenerys' growing influence meant. Some believed she was laying the foundations of empire. Others insisted she had turned her back on conquest and should be left alone. But news traveled fast now, faster than ships, and the North heard whispers too. Jon Snow read her letters. He kept them, quietly. He thought of her often. The wars in Westeros dragged on, but there was a strange peace in the thought that someone, somewhere, had chosen not to claim a throne through blood. Back in Meereen, Daenerys walked alone through the rebuilt quarters of the city, no guards beside her. The people bowed to her not out of fear, but reverence. She would pause at bakeries, taste their sweets, and ask what they needed. "We need no more chains," one baker told her. "Only time." She nodded, but her thoughts were distant. Drogon had taken to flying further and further east, sometimes disappearing for days. When he returned, he seemed restless. The old magic, of Valyria perhaps, was calling again. One night, he did not return. Daenerys stood alone on the pyramid top, scanning the dark sky. "Where are you going, my son?" she whispered. The stars gave no answer. The days passed, then weeks. Drogon did not return. At first, Daenerys did not panic. Dragons were creatures of mystery and ancient instinct. Drogon had always been the wild one, untamed even by her. He had disappeared before, but never for so long and never without a sign. Missandei urged caution. Grey Worm doubled the patrols. Spies were sent toward the ruins of Valyria, to the haunted lands east of Slaver's Bay, and even north into the Sea of Sighs. Nothing. No scorched villages, no sightings, not even a tale. It was as if Drogon had vanished into legend. Still, Daenerys ruled, with patience and fire in her voice. When Qohor banned Meereen's ships from docking, she responded with diplomacy, sending envoys with grain, not swords. "Let them know we feed those who fear us," she told Daario. "Let them choke on their pride." But beneath her calm surface, doubt crept in. Without Drogon, was she still the Dragon Queen? Or was she simply a girl from a doomed line, playing at empire in a land that did not want to be ruled? Then came the dream. It was not a dream of prophecy, not like the visions in the House of the Undying. This one was clear. She stood on black glass, surrounded by fire, and before her knelt a dragon, not Drogon, but something older, larger. Its eyes burned, with a green flame, and behind it stood a man with silver hair and violet eyes. Not Viserys, not Jon, Rhaegar. "You left the storm behind," he said, "but the fire still burns ahead." She awoke, covered in sweat. The fire in her room had gone out, though no wind stirred the air. The next day, a raven arrived from the far reaches of the Dothraki Sea. It carried no letter, only a piece of charred leather, blackened and thick with the scent of dragon hide. Drogon had been seen. He had flown toward the smoking sea, toward Valyria itself. And he had not been alone. With no hesitation, Daenerys made ready to follow. "I cannot build peace in Essos if my fire has vanished," she told her council. "Drogon is not just a symbol. He is part of me." Daario objected. So did Grey Worm. Even Missandei begged her to send others first. But Daenerys had made a promise long ago, back when she first walked into Khal Drogo's pyre. "I will take what is mine, with fire and blood." So she sailed. Her ship, Storm Daughter, cut through the waters with no banners, only black sails. With her went a small company, 10 unsullied, Missandei, and one old warrior who had returned from exile, Jorah Mormont. He had come back to Meereen quietly, healed of his grayscale and guilt, offering nothing but service. She had accepted, not because she trusted him fully, but because she needed someone who had walked through fire once and survived. As they approached the smoking sea, the sky turned red. The waters steamed. Ruins of Valyria loomed like bones of a dead god, jutting from the ash-choked fog. Birds did not fly here. Shadows moved where there should have been none. Drogon came to them on the third day. He descended from the sky with a roar that shook the ship to its core. His wings were torn in places. Scars marked his scales. But he was alive, and in his claws he carried something no one expected. A dragon egg. It pulsed with heat, gold-veined and obsidian black. When Drogon set it before her, Daenerys knelt. For the first time in years, she wept. But that was not the only surprise. From behind the ruins emerged another dragon, smaller but fierce, with green scales and yellow eyes. It was no illusion. It flew awkwardly but burned with the same fire as Drogon. A lost hatchling. Jorah whispered, "They say in Valyria, wild dragons still haunt the sky. This one must have heard his call." Daenerys did not speak. Her eyes were locked on the horizon, where ruins burned and mountains smoked. Then came the voice. "You have awoken what should have slept." It was not a man. It was not a woman. It was a whisper in the fog, a voice older than kings. The sea grew still, the dragons stilled. Even Drogon lowered his head. A figure stepped from the blackness, robed in crimson, face hidden. They held a staff carved from bone and fire. "You will bring balance or destruction." Daenerys stepped forward. "I bring freedom." "No, you bring choice, and choice has a cost." The figure vanished with the wind. The fog swallowed their words. That night, Daenerys lit a fire on the shores of old Valyria and placed the egg in the center. Drogon circled above. The wild dragon stayed at her side. "If fire must be born again," she said to the flame, "let it be born with purpose." The egg cracked. A new scream pierced the sky. The egg shattered like stone, giving way to thunder. From its molten core emerged a hatchling, red as ember and lined with golden veins that pulsed with heat. It blinked at Daenerys, no larger than a wolf pup, and hissed, already stretching stubby wings toward her. Drogon loomed behind, watching silently, and for the first time did not react with territorial growls. It was as if he knew, as if this creature was not just a new dragon, but a continuation of something far older than both of them. Daenerys named it Nyx, for the darkness that birthed it and the stars it would fly beneath. They stayed on the ash coast of Valyria for 3 more days. The second dragon, the green-scaled one, never strayed far from Drogon. It had no name, no master, and Daenerys dared not try to tame it. It had chosen to stay, and that was enough. At night, she walked alone among the ruins. The great halls of old Valyria had long since crumbled, but fragments remained, strange pillars etched with high Valyrian runes that pulsed faintly when touched. One night, as she passed between 2 towers, she saw something gleaming. A mirror of polished obsidian, and in it, not her reflection, but her father's, Eris, the Mad King. Whispering words she could not hear, mouthing something over and over. She pressed her palm to the glass, and the image shattered. The shards cut her skin. The blood hissed as it touched the ground. Jorah found her kneeling there, eyes wide, hand bleeding. He offered her a cloth. She took it, but said nothing. They returned to Meereen with the hatchling, Drogon, and a silent warning etched in Daenerys' bones. Magic was waking, and not just dragonfire. Back in the city, time had not stood still. The council had splintered during her absence. Dario had tried to maintain order, but enemies both within and beyond the city had moved. Assassinations had returned. Qohor and Lys had sent agents to incite unrest, posing as merchants and priests. A new group had formed, the Gilded Fangs, a syndicate of former slavers, nobles, and mercenaries who wanted Daenerys gone or dead. Grey Worm executed 3 traitors in a single day, publicly, blood on the palace steps. Daenerys did not stop him. My absence gave them courage, she said. Let my return remind them why they feared me. But she did not want to rule through fear. So she summoned the council, all of them, loyal and suspected alike. She stood. In her throne room, Nyx curled around her shoulders, Drogon perched above the great arch, watching with coals in his eyes. This city was not built for dragons, she said, her voice calm. It was built for chains, for coins, for silence. That is why it has been burned and rebuilt 100 times. But now we build something different. She walked among them slowly, her bare feet touching the marble floor. I left to find my fire. I returned with more than flame. I returned with clarity. The world does not need a queen. She paused. Murmurs began. One councilman stood, confused. You abdicate? Daenerys smiled faintly. No. I evolve. She declared the Council of Meereen would now govern through vote, its members drawn from each district, elected every 2 years. She would act only as guide, guardian, and voice in crises. Drogon would no longer be a symbol of rule, but of justice. Nyx would remain hidden, growing in secret, guarded by Missandei and Jorah in the palace crypts. I will not pass my crown to children nor to swords, she said. I will pass it to those who earn the trust of the people. Many doubted. Some laughed. By week's end, 3 of the loudest doubters were found poisoned. No evidence, no witnesses, only coins placed on their eyes, coins marked with a fang. The Gilded Fangs had declared war, but Daenerys did not flinch. She called together her loyal forces, the Unsullied, the Dothraki who had stayed, the Sons of the Dragon, and sent word to Astapor, to Yunkai, even to Braavos. We are not an empire, her message said. We are a movement, but movements, like dragons, have wings. Then she rode Drogon over the skies of Essos, not to burn, but to be seen, to remind the world that she still lived. That fire did not die. It changed form, and in the night, far across the sea in Westeros, Jon Snow stood atop the walls of Winterfell. A raven came. No letter, only a scale, red and gold. He held it in his hand, eyes narrowing. She's coming back, he whispered, but not as they remembered her. Snow drifted softly through the towers of Winterfell as Jon Snow turned the red-gold scale in his palm. It was warm still, impossibly so. No sigil, no message, but its meaning was clear. Dragons still flew in the east, and Daenerys Targaryen had not vanished into myth. She had grown stronger, smarter, and somehow more distant than ever. Sansa noticed the change in him before he said a word. You've heard from her, she said, not asking, only stating. Even after everything. Jon nodded slowly. I thought she was done with thrones, but the fire doesn't sleep forever. Sansa's gaze hardened. Then Westeros should prepare. But Daenerys had no intention of invading. Not yet. Her war was in Essos, and it had begun. The Gilded Fangs struck in coordinated waves, fires in the market districts, poisonings in the bakeries, explosions in the aqueducts. Their message was clear. The old order would not surrender to the dream of a just world. In return, Daenerys gave them no room to breathe. Grey Worm led raids on their safe houses. Missandei decoded intercepted letters in 3 languages. Jorah hunted their leaders with the patience of a man who had seen too many wars. But it was Drogon's roar over the rooftops that turned fear into legend. No fire was used, only presence. A reminder of what lay in wait. One evening, Nyx attempted her first flight, soaring awkwardly off the palace wall before tumbling into a shallow canal. Children laughed. Daenerys laughed with them. She waded in herself, soaked and smiling, lifting. the dragonling into her arms. "Even fire must learn to fall before it flies," she said. That moment was painted on walls by artists across Meereen. The queen in the water. The laughing flame. She was becoming something new. Not just a ruler or a legend, a symbol. But symbols have enemies. A masked assassin slipped through the palace gates one night, blades dipped in basilisk venom. He reached Daenerys' chambers undetected. But as he raised his dagger, Drogon smashed through the wall like a storm. The assassin was torn in two before he could even scream. No one had summoned Drogon. That same night, the green dragon, now called Verdant, by the people, vanished. Some said it flew east toward the Bone Mountains. Others claimed it had been claimed by a sorcerer in Yi Tai. Daenerys did not search for it. Dragons did not belong in cages, not even hers. Instead, she focused her attention on Quohor. Through Intercepted. Letters she had learned the Gilded Fangs had a base hidden beneath its temple district. But she would not burn the city. She would do something subtler, smarter. She sent Missandei and Jorah as diplomats bearing terms of trade, forged documents of alliance, and carefully crafted lies that played Quohor's ruling factions against one another. By month's end, the city had erupted in civil strife. The Gilded Fangs' leaders were executed by their own supposed allies. Daenerys' hands never touched a sword. "I do not rule with fire," she told a gathering in Meereen's amphitheater. "I rule with knowledge. Fire is for those who do not listen." Drogon circled high above them, casting no shadow. Nyx, now the size of a warhorse, had taken to flying beside him. And then, unexpectedly, Daenerys received a raven from Winterfell. Jon's handwriting. Clean, honest. Just a few lines. "You've changed the world more than any throne ever could, but they will come for you. When they do, don't forget who you were before the dragon. If you need me, I will come. Not as a king, just as myself." She read it 3 times, then burned it. But she remembered every word. In Braavos, the Iron Bank sent a message of their own. "You create stability, Queen Daenerys, and stability yields profit." They offered coin. Daenerys declined. "Tell them to invest in the people," she said, "and they'll be richer than they've ever dreamed." Word spread of her restraint, of her fire, of the red dragon and the young one at its side, of the woman who refused gold, burned thrones in effigy, and walked with killers and scholars alike. The world began to call her something new, the Queen of Balance. But balance cannot hold forever. In the deep south, in the deserts of the Red, waste, an old enemy stirred. A slaver prince, once thought dead in the siege of Yunkai, had survived. Scarred, twisted, rich beyond measure, and now, with exiled mages, blood sorcerers, and foreign sellswords, he was building something monstrous, an army not of men, but of shadows and fire-blooded beasts. Their name would soon echo across Essos, the Cinder Host, and Daenerys would face a choice, to become a ruler once more, or to become a weapon. The reports came first as rumors, then as ash-covered survivors. Villages in the southern Red Waste disappearing overnight, the sands blackened, livestock melted where they stood. The sky itself was said to have turned red above the attacks, not from dragons, but from something darker. Shadows that moved with intent. Fire that screamed. The name spread in frightened whispers. The Cinder Host. Daenerys studied the accounts with a furrowed brow, sitting before a great table of the Free City's eastern maps. Missandei read aloud from the latest scroll. The attackers left no wounded, only glassed stone. The water in the wells boiled, and they spoke. Daenerys looked up. Spoke? Missandei nodded. Witnesses say the flames whispered names. Names of the dead, names of the enslaved, names of rulers. Jorah entered then, his armor dusted from the northern patrol. They're not just burning land, they're sending a message. Daenerys stood slowly. Then we'll send one back. But this time, fire would not be enough. The enemy was led by Prince Jal of Yunkai, the last of the great slaver dynasties. Scarred from Drogon's fire during the liberation of Slaver's Bay, he had vanished for years. Rumors said he had traveled east to the ruins of Valyria and farther still to forbidden temples in the mountains of the Morn. There, he had bartered blood for power. Now he returned with magic soaked in death, wearing armor laced with obsidian. Riding a beast forged of both flame and rot, a cinder worm, unnatural and pulsing with molten veins. The Cinder host grew each day, devouring towns that had pledged loyalty to Daenerys' cause. Their soldiers were not simply men, but flame-touched, warriors who did not burn, who bled smoke and ash when cut. Fear took root in Meereen for the first time since the wars of old, but Daenerys did not flinch. She summoned her council. We are not facing an army. We are facing vengeance given form, she said. We cannot fight it with steel alone. Grey Worm offered strategy. Missandei brought ancient texts on shadow binding. Jorah warned of traps, but it was Daario who proposed. The boldest idea. Meet him in the field. Show him the fire he could never control. Let Drogon end this before it grows. Daenerys considered it, but something deeper stirred in her. No, she said finally. I will go, but not to destroy him. Not yet. Her plan was simple, mad, and utterly Daenerys. She would parley. She sent ravens, not to Jal, but to the cities he had once terrorized, Korth, Volantis, even Norvos. You ignored him before, her message said. Now he comes for you all. Stand beside me or be the next to burn. She flew to the edge of the red waste with Drogon and Nyx, the sky behind her streaked with trailing firelight. The Cinder host waited in a dead valley where nothing lived. The air shimmered with heat, and in the center of it stood Prince Jal, his face a map of burns, his eyes lit with a fire that had no soul. He rode his beast, a mockery of a dragon, twisted, shrieking, made not of flesh, but of fused bone and liquid flame. It snarled at Drogon, who growled in return, but did not strike. I expected swords, Jal said, not speeches. Daenerys stood on the scorched earth in her ash-white robes, Nyx circling above. You expect only fire. That is your failure, she said. You survived my mercy once. You won't survive my justice. Jal laughed. You think this is justice? You set fire to my world, now I burn yours. I gave your city a chance. You spat on it. I broke your chains. You forged them again from blood. His mount stepped forward, lava dripping from its mouth. But now, Jal hissed, I don't burn for revenge. I burn for dominion. Daenerys met his gaze. Then let the world see what happens to those who confuse flame with purpose. And then she turned her back on him. He screamed in fury and sent the cinder worm into the sky. But Drogon was faster, stronger, real. They clashed in the clouds with a boom like the gods' own thunder. Ash rained from above. Nyx, still young but agile, darted through the air, tearing into the flame-forged beast's wings. From below, soldiers of the Cinder host watched their master's terror made flesh be shredded in the skies. Drogon pinned, the cinder worm to the earth in a column of roaring fire. And Daenerys stood alone in the valley, watching Prince Jal drop to his knees, his power broken. She said nothing, only raised her hand. And Drogon stopped. Jal was not dead. That was her message. I don't burn what I pity, she said. I rebuild what others abandon. You chose death. I choose legacy. She turned once more. Jal lay screaming in. The dust! The free cities answered her raven within a week. They offered coin, fleets, alliances, not from fear, from awe. Daenerys accepted nothing. I will not become what they fear. I will become what they hope cannot exist. The war ended not with fire, but with a queen walking unburned from the heart of destruction. But far to the west in Westeros, a raven left Storm's End, and in King's Landing, a new ruler had taken the throne. One who remembered dragons. One who whispered, "Let her grow strong. We'll kill her when she flies too far." The flames of the red waste cooled. Black glass dunes marked where Jarl and his cinder host had fallen. Daenerys returned to Meereen not in triumph, but in silence. Her dragons flew above the city as a storm might pass over a village. Too vast, too powerful, too distant. She had not conquered. She had endured, and yet something in her had shifted. Where before she had ruled with passion, now she ruled with restraint. She no longer made declarations from high balconies. She walked the streets instead, quietly. No guards, no fanfare. People bowed, but she rarely spoke. It was as though Daenerys Stormborn had begun to fade into something else, a myth that lived beside them but no longer among them. Nyx had grown. Now the size of a grown bull, she was wilder than Drogon had ever been at her age. She flew unpredictably, often disappearing for days over the Dothraki Sea, only to return with fresh scars and blood on her claws. Daenerys never scolded her. She only watched her with eyes full of memory. "I was her once," she whispered to Missandei one dawn, watching the young dragon tear through a sky of clouds. "Fire without direction." Missandei smiled softly. "You gave yourself direction? That's what made you different. But not all change is welcomed." Word came from Westeros. A new monarch had taken the Iron Throne, Queen Baratheon, daughter of Gendry and legitimized by an uneasy alliance of remaining noble houses. Her advisors were young, but her counsel shrewd. She ruled with steel, order, and a careful eye on the east. Daenerys did not flinch at the news. She did not long for the throne anymore. She had outgrown it, but she knew Westeros would not ignore her forever. Power, even when unused, draws ambition. One night, as she walked the palace halls, she came upon Jorah kneeling before a brazier, praying. "To whom?" she asked. He looked up, tired and old. "To the gods I once ignored. I ask them not to let you forget what makes you different." She knelt beside him. "What is that?" "You still believe people can change, even after everything." She said nothing. 2 days later, a ship from Braavos arrived. A representative of the Iron Bank stepped onto the Meereen docks bearing a sealed letter. It contained no offers, only questions. "What do you intend to do with peace?" it asked. "Because peace too must be accounted for." Daenerys gave no answer. Instead, she turned her attention to the free cities. She began sending teachers to Norvos, engineers to Lys, grain to the poor districts of Qohor, all free of charge. "You want a new world?" she told her council. "It must be built with more than fire." The merchant princes didn't understand her. They tried to bribe her, threaten her. Some sent assassins. One even tried to capture Nyx while she roamed near the summer sea. That man was never found again. But in the quiet corners of the world, something new began to rise. Not armies, not temples, stories. Children played games where they rode imaginary dragons, pretending to rebuild cities instead of destroy them. Traders began calling her the flame that heals. In Braavos, a play was written in her honor, not about her conquests, but about her restraint. A dragon queen who chose peace when war was hers to command. And then, another letter arrived. From the north. Again, from Jon Snow. "They say you've stopped conquering, that you plant more than you burn. That's the best kind of power. but they'll fear it more than ever. If they come, they'll come with chains, not swords. Don't wear them again. She folded the letter slowly, kept it in a carved box with a lock she never opened, and then came the vision. She stood in her chamber, Nyx asleep beside the hearth, when the fire flared unnaturally high. She saw a hall of glass and stone, snow falling through broken roofs, a throne of blades buried beneath ice, and standing before it, her own reflection. Not Daenerys as she was, but as she might become, eyes cold, wings of flame. Alone, a voice echoed through the flames. You will either light the world or leave it in darkness. She woke gasping. The hearth had gone out. The next morning, she summoned her council. It's time, she said, to fly again. Jorah blinked. Where? Daenerys looked to the sky, where Drogon circled above Nyx like a watchful star. West. The council fell silent. You mean to return? She nodded. Not to conquer, not to claim, but to remind them. The world did not end at their shores. Missandei stood first. Then we fly with you. Within the week, the skies over Meereen were filled with motion. Ships were prepared. Messages sent. Daenerys would leave her city in the hands of a chosen council, overseen by Missandei and Grey Worm. She would not rule from afar. She would go to learn what the world had become. Drogon screeched over the bay. Nyx followed him, wild and free, and Daenerys once again became the Stormborn, not as a conqueror, but as a reckoning. The sky over Blackwater Bay split in two. Drogon's wings cast a shadow so vast that sailors dropped their oars, and farmers in the Crown Lands looked skyward with mouths open in forgotten prayers. Behind him flew Nyx, smaller but faster, her crimson-black scales flashing like blood and steel in the sunlight. Between them, aboard a lean Braavosi ship trimmed in black sails, stood Daenerys Targaryen, no longer seeking thrones, no longer asking for loyalty, no longer burning for vengeance. She came as a force of nature, as a question the realm had long refused to answer. King's Landing froze beneath her arrival. Bells rang out, not in surrender, but in warning. But no fire fell. Daenerys did not land. She circled the capital once, high enough that only nobles with long glasses could see her pale silver hair in the wind. The Iron Throne stood behind walls that now bristled with scorpions and ballistae. Soldiers manned them, but no bolts were fired. They all remembered, everyone remembered, and then she turned away. South, toward Storm's End. Queen Baratheon was waiting. Rain lashed the stones as Daenerys dismounted. Drogon perched high on the cliffs, Nyx curling beside him, her gaze locked on the guards who did not know whether to bow or run. Inside the hall, torches flickered, casting long shadows as the two women stood across from each other, Storm and Flame meeting in silence. You've come far, Queen Baratheon said. Young, strong, her father's steel in her eyes. I came to speak, Daenerys replied. Not to threaten. You brought dragons. I always bring dragons. Neither. Woman blinked. At last, Gendry's daughter motioned to the hall. Then speak. Daenerys did not posture. She did not invoke ancient claims or speak of oaths broken. She spoke of a world too small for thrones made of swords, of cities that ruled by fear and tradition while their people starved and whispered. I've built something better across the sea, she said. Not a kingdom, a movement. Free cities governed by their people, trade rooted in cooperation, not conquest. I came here not to demand the same. I came to offer it. The queen laughed softly. You think Westeros can be changed? I know it can. You sit on a throne your father never dreamed of. That's already change. A silence fell between them. In it, the storm outside grew louder, but not as loud as Nyx's distant screech. "What happens," the queen asked, "if I say no?" Daenerys stepped closer. "Then I leave, and I let the world see what choice looks like." The queen studied her, saw no hunger in her eyes, no madness, only clarity, fire refined into something rare, conviction without conquest. Finally, she said, "I won't kneel. I don't want you to. But I will send envoys. I want to see it. What you've built." Daenerys smiled. "Then come see it." They parted without ceremony. No treaties signed. No banners raised, just understanding. And understanding, Daenerys had learned, was the seed of revolution. Over the next month, Daenerys and her dragons flew north, not to Winterfell. She would not force that reunion, but in the skies above the Gift, a lone rider watched from horseback as Drogon passed like a moving mountain, and he saw her, Jon Snow. He did not wave, he did not ride after her, but he whispered her name to the wind, and the wind carried it. From the Westerlands to the Reach, whispers followed the dragons. Farmers told tales of a silver queen who flew over villages and left grain behind, of a younger dragon who played in the lakes, of fire that brought not death, but light. And across the narrow sea in Meereen, the council held strong. Grey Worm maintained order. Missandei taught a new generation of scribes. Jorah rode the Dothraki plains to keep peace among the tribes. The dream did not falter. It adapted. In time, letters came to Daenerys, not from kings, but from students, scholars, healers, and builders. Come teach us. Come show us. Come help us build what you see in your dreams. And she did. She no longer called herself queen. She no longer needed to. She became a traveler, a witness, a fire that passed through lands and left light in her wake. And when people asked her name, she would say, "I was Daenerys Stormborn. I was mother of dragons. But now I am only a flame." And the world remembered her not for what she burned, but for what she chose not to.